Hey guys, and welcome to this masterclass. I'm really excited to dive in with you today. This is something that is very close to my heart and a really important part of the many multifaceted work that I do. So today we're going to be diving into what I have been witnessing as a healing journey that my women clients go through. And you may see yourself in this journey somewhere. If you're a man watching, you may see your girlfriend, wife, sister, mother, daughter somewhere in this journey. Something that I've been observing both in my clients and social circles, but also in the world at large. And this really is the journey of healing back to feminine instinct. And of course, there's also the journey of men healing into masculine instinct. But today I'm going to focus mostly on the journey that I'm observing of women coming home to their feminine instincts in a culture that is at large very disconnected from both feminine instincts and masculine instincts. It's a really multi-layered journey for most women I've worked with. There's layers of self-discovery as they connect to their true instincts that present to themselves, often present the missing pieces of the puzzle. And where this connecting to your feminine instincts as a woman, connecting to your masculine instincts as a man, where this differs in terms of other personal development or self-discovery is that it's what I've noticed in the personal development world is there are so many different philosophies and theories, and even in traditional counseling therapy, there's all these different practices. And what I started to notice was that most of them, in my mind, at a certain point, had a pretty big flaw or hole in them that were not actually allowing like true long-lasting healing transformation to happen, but that were continuing to contribute to somebody staying stuck or not really healing and continuing to, run these same patterns of disconnect or unhappiness, so on. And yet the work of helping women connect to their feminine instincts has been hugely healing. And this is where, when I started to do this work with my clients, I started to see their intimate relationships transform, their friendships transform, their lives, their connection to their business, their connection to their bodies, their health, their well-being, really radically transform from a very grounded, solid base. And interestingly enough, for me, the work that I also do with clients in connecting to their genius and connecting to their creativity, that actually ends up meeting up with them connecting to their instincts. So this is this really interesting thing where the sort of very ethereal, untethered world of connecting to the genius actually meets up with this very like nature-based, grounded, mammalian, like primal, instinct-based world that that I feel called to guide people back to. And yeah, it's interesting because it's one of those things I'll briefly share that has been present for me my whole life. I grew up in tree planting camps. I grew up living in the bush for 6 months of the year in an environment where I was the only child, which is a little strange, but was very formative and potent environment to learn and grow in. And I was surrounded by groups of men and women. Usually our camp had between 25 and 40 people, and these were all men and women in their prime, working really hard physically, working together. And it was probably the closest thing to like living in a tribe that you could experience in the Western world. Like it was very much like that. And what I observed was also a lot of deep connection to instinct in those environments, because when you're in a natural environment without a lot of technology or services that we rely on, and you become more reliant on the people around you to make something happen, like for example setting up a camp or dealing with an emergency when you're 4 or 5 hours away from a hospital. What happens is people become very rapidly become much more connected to their instincts and become much more sovereign, much more self-reliant. So I grew up in these environments where, you know, if somebody like broke their leg or hurt their ankle or had something really dramatic happen, we were often 4 or 5 hour drive away from a hospital on a bumpy log road. So people dealt with things in a different way. And this is just one example, but there was a need for people to be connected to their instincts. And also there was a very low injury rate considering what we were doing. And I often wonder if that is attributed to the fact that we weren't near, you know, hospitals, things like that. But what I also saw was this natural hierarchy of leadership, men and women who in that environment, in the environment of tree planting, there is a high level of self-leadership required to be successful as a tree planter, as a forest athlete, as Brinkman, he coined this term. But there's a high level of self-leadership required because you are being paid per tree. So the harder you work, the more money you earn. And a lot of people who came out tree planting in the summertime were either university students in the wintertime or traveling in the wintertime. So they would be trying to earn all their money or as much money as they could during the summer months for the winter. And they're also in an environment where they're not spending a lot of money because you're in the bush and food is provided for you. And so this, what I mean by self-leadership is, you know, the harder you work, the more trees you plant, the more money you earn. And this is like a daily grind. So there is the community aspect of, you know, breakfast is at a certain time, the trucks roll out at a certain time. That is like created and led by external forces. But then individually, there's a high level of leadership, and then as a group. So in that environment, you really see how people, like I said, work together in a crisis. Maybe there's like a big windstorm and the mess tent where everybody eats is, you know, 20 feet in the air on one end and people are trying to pull it down. So you see how people work together. You see this natural hierarchy where people who have greater leadership skills in terms of being able to lead others naturally like move to those positions. Okay, suddenly there's somebody who's driving the vehicle, or there's somebody who is getting their first aid, or whatever it is. They're given, you know, greater responsibility. Goes to people who are able. There wasn't a lot of, there's really not a lot of room in that environment for people to be given a job that they're not capable of carrying. It just doesn't work. And so a really interesting environment to grow up in and to see this, and then to like have the very contrasting experience of attending grade school during the winter months and being in a completely different environment that really didn't make a lot of sense to me in terms of spending 8 hours a day in the classroom with students who were the same age as me, learning things that didn't make a lot of sense. But I'll save that for another time. What I really want to dive into today is this journey that I see that is happening somewhat collectively, although also not, but certainly in the individual clients who I work with. So often I've worked with many women who, when they jumped into work with me, have been in a place of big life transformation, like life overhaul. And sometimes this is a relationship has just ended. They're, in the process of divorce, long-term marriage is ending. They're stepping into that time period of being single, independent. Or I've also worked with many women who are married, but their relationship is not what they want, married or committed, and the relationship is not what they want. And, but and also work with women who are running a business and not wanting to experience burnout in their business, not wanting to continue to run it from so much masculine energy. And then also, of course, I work with women in their role as mothers and what that looks like. And what I noticed so I have been working with, I'm not like working with like a niche. I'm working with many different people, often in group programs together. And what I really started to notice was that this coming back to feminine instincts was helping my clients more than anything. And there's, for most women, when they first start this process, there's like almost a repulsion because of what we've been taught in our culture, that women that we're supposed to be strong, we're supposed to be equal to men, just like men, better than men, all the different layers of the feminine empowerment movement, and how it affects and plays into our own ideas as women about what we want, what makes us happy, how we should show up in relationships, how we should show up in the workplace. What I noticed was a really big theme was that a lot of my clients were in competition, unconsciously were in competition with men, including their husbands or partners, and how this was like taking away from their own power, but also from their own joy, and how they had learned to place their value and feelings of success, happiness, contentment, fulfillment, their self-worth had been formulated by masculine self-worth rather than feminine self-worth, by achievements. How much had they gotten done? How successful were they? And this, of course, comes from very early conditioning where, in our culture, in our day and age, really young women are pushed to be very career oriented, to be very successful. There's almost no, unless you come from like a more traditional culture, there's almost no dialogue around what it means to be a mother, to be a homemaker, to be to have a family. It's almost like these things, our society seems to pretend like they're not important, and like it's okay to have somebody else raise your children, or like you'll just figure that out, but like career first. And while there's nothing wrong with women having their own career and all of that, that's wonderful. But what I noticed was that for many women, they couldn't actually relax into and fully enjoy and appreciate their role as a mother. So I'll share a specific story of one client who I absolutely loved working with, who, when we started working together, we were focusing on her developing her business, her finishing her book. And Partway through our work together, she told me that our work had potentially saved her marriage, that she had been, her and her husband had 3 kids. She had been observing her friends and peers around her leave their marriages because they wanted to be more sovereign, because they wanted greater independence. Not even that necessarily that the marriage wasn't working, but that they wanted to be more sovereign, more independent. And then they were creating these relationships that were very equal, like I'll do me, you do you, maybe we'll meet sometimes, but there wasn't like a collaborative effort happening in their relationships. And she recognized in herself that she's a very easily influenced person in ways. She's also very sovereign in other ways. And she recognized that she had been leaning towards that as it was like this trend. And it was like she caught herself in that process and realized how much she deeply loves her husband, and how much she had created this idea that, or like had been trying on this idea anyways, that sovereignty, freedom is only possible when you are independent as a woman. And it was one of the most poignant moments of my work, because I remember the conversation with her, and I remember just saying to her that for me personally, as someone who has I spent 18 years from age 18 to 37, I guess that's 19 years in a marriage. And, we had 3 children together. We had a 4th child who died as a baby. We had a whole family together, like a whole life together. There were times in that relationship where I felt deeply, deeply supported and cherished and cared for. And there were also times that were really tumultuous. And then I've also had time as, an independent, fairly successful, I'm going to use brackets, woman. And I just looked at her and it was like the deepest level of sovereignty that I will ever know personally is within a committed, devoted, polarized relationship with a man who I deeply respect and who deeply cherishes me. That's where I personally will experience the greatest sovereignty and the greatest freedom. And it was one of those conversations that when we really got into it, I remember the conversation really well, because she was like, could you say that again? Because it was, this sort of moment of like collapsing, almost like the feminine empowerment movement that's just like going and going and going. Another one bites the dust, like another home wrecked, another marriage done, another whatever. And I'm not saying that all relationships are meant to last a lifetime. They're not. Some relationships have a timeline, and some relationships are not repairable. But in the case of my client, she had and has an incredible relationship, and really she caught herself in the trendiness of our culture. And a lot of her work in her relationship was actually just about acknowledging what her contribution was. Like, we all have the desire to feel like we're contributing in our relationships. And we live in this time that is heavily, pushing people to both work outside the home, that pushing people to have like, where men and women both do everything. And as a result, we're losing out on the like co-creative yin and yang sort of way that men and women are meant to work together. And it was a beautiful thing, a beautiful moment with her, just to see that she could also experience this sovereignty, freedom, sense of self that she was longing to experience within her marriage, and without it being that like this concept that she was giving something up, or that she wasn't sovereign within herself. And so that was an incredible example. And on more subtle examples with clients, what I notice is I notice them coming to terms with how they are, standing in this energy of trying to control their relationship, trying to control their husband or boyfriend, trying to control everything in their lives, which has become familiar for a lot of women in our culture in this time that we live in, where true, healthy, embodied, instinctual masculine energy is few and far between. What we have is all these women who are essentially running in a state of like hyper activity or hyperneurosis, where it's the even the idea of like fully trusting a man is like very foreign for most modern women, right? There's all of our language around it too, and not all of our language, but a huge part of our language around relationships right now is very like controlling, tit for tat, and not trusting. And this was where I started to realize that when I connected with my clients in their deepest, truest, instinctually connected desires, was this desire to fully trust men and fully trust life and fully trust the masculine frame energy. And I'm not even talking about like the men and women who are in the like death to the patriarchy like zone, like that's so far beyond my reach of who I work with. I'm talking about people who have an awareness that that's what they want, but they're still bringing these cultural conditionings and layers to the table of not really knowing how to like be in instinctual feminine energy, because it's something they've never experienced. They've never seen it demonstrated by their mom or grandmother or aunt or other women around them. And but as they start to let go of those layers of ideas that that feminine self-worth would be the same as masculine self-worth, they're so different. These are some of the things that I have noticed when women start to actively move away from running a whole bunch of masculine energy in their lives and move into running more feminine energy. And like for some, it starts with, there's many different aspects to this, and I'm going to say as much as I can in this short masterclass. But there's many aspects where when women are like trying to connect more with their feminine energy, it's like they start with like, oh, like it's like clothing or music or movies they're watching. It's none of that. Like you literally could wear sweatpants and no makeup and be completely connected to your feminine energy. Or you could be dressed to the nines and be like beautifully dressed. There's so much discussion right now, so much in the coaching industry around polarity and feminine and masculine dynamics that can actually be yet another mask that men or women put on, because stepping into that instinctual energy, unless you are really in your own instinctual energy, it can be very manipulative. And so this is one thing that I notice when women start to connect with that desire. One of the desires that I see come to the surface is the desire to be really led in a relationship, to be really guided, to really trust. And for many clients who I've worked with, there's actually initial like conflict in their body where it's almost like an alarm goes off, where they're like, this is, can be multiple things. It can be an alarm that goes off that's like, whoa, this isn't safe. I can't trust this person, because if I do, this will happen or whatever. That can be one. Or another one is, you know, that independent boss babe, I can do it all myself. I don't need a man or a masculine counterpart who is like holding that frame. And so that comes into play. And then underneath that is this like deep desire to experience what it feels like to fully trust a man who is your partner, who you're intimate with. And when women start to work through the layers of this and realize how much they've been guarding their hearts, how much they've been fronting or performing, most women that I've worked with, a huge part of their intimate experiences, even how they move through their day-to-day life and connect with their friends, even in their work. There's so much of it is like a big shield, protection around their heart, and often an identity that is not very authentic. But it's like something that they've created to navigate this world. And when they start to connect deeply to that like raw, real feminine instinct to feel deeply safe and feel protected and provided for and led, and to experience men in that leadership, warrior, protector, provider role, what I notice is, this initial, like I said, almost like conflict in the body for many women where they're like, this feels really good and also really scary, or I'm sort of repulsed. And that can be like the initial phases. And then as they start to move into that, what I observe is women will start to float away or move away from friendships, relationships with men, business partnerships, romantic relationships where they've been carrying that masculine role. So often women will go through a phase or maybe their whole lives where they've enjoyed being in this sort of like mothering, caretaking, nurturing role in their relationships. Mothering, caretaking, nurturing are all actually quite masculine. That the caretaking energy is quite masculine, and which is confusing for some people, but there it is. And because there's that like feeling of importance, like she feels so important because she's caretaking him. And yet this is where couples are like, they can be really confused about what's happening in their, this is where you have like the honeymoon period where I think the chemistry is like really spicy and things are really like hot and fiery. And then after a short period of time, she moves into caretaker role, mothering him, reminding him of all the things that need to happen. She starts planning. She becomes the social planner for the family or the relationship. And she's controlling in all these different ways, which for many women is comfortable, familiar, they're good at it. And ultimately, they're missing a huge part of what's possible in a relationship when that's not present, when she's not leading. And when they start to have that awareness, it's like they're who they're attracted to actually shifts, which is really wild for women to experience, where they're suddenly like, whoa, I'm no longer attracted to those relationships where I'm playing this role of like caretaking or reminding. And it starts to become this like really heavy burden, and they start to become aware of all the drama that was present in the relationship, the sort of yo-yo diet type relationship where it's like really great one day and like terrible the next, and lots of fighting and arguing, and maybe even like we're breaking up or not, and so much confusion around why, right? Because they're essentially men and women not honoring their instincts in a relationship. And so then what I see is as women start to like let that go, and they're like, okay, I'm not going to control this relationship anymore. I'm not going to lead. I'm not going to be in a mothering role. And they begin to lean back. Sometimes the relationship will shift for the better. Or if they're single, what will happen is they are, like I said, who they're attracted to begins to dramatically change. And some of the really interesting things that I've noticed with my clients is that as they stop running so much masculine energy, it's not that they stop altogether, right? Men and women both have masculine and feminine. Like a sort of ideal ratio is like 70-30 or 80-20, right? As women, we need to have some masculine energy to, hold a frame, get things done, move through life. Absolutely, we need that. And men also need to have some feminine energy. But when that is out of balance, one of the biggest things that I noticed was how women's health improved. And this is where it became like a deeper truth for me, where I was like, whoa, this is what I'm seeing, where suddenly they were like naturally losing weight or gaining weight or sleeping better, or even experiencing less PMS symptoms, for example, having like better digestion, sleeping better, all of these things simply from stepping out of running that masculine energy. And it will combined with being not being around men or interacting with men in a way that is inverted, where they are playing that like nurturing role, but instead leaning back and being led and being discerning, right? Like that is the masculine frame that women also need, is that discernment of like, wait, this is not healthy, or I don't like where I'm being led, right? Like there's so much confusion in the world of polarity teachings about like submitting and submission and dominance and what that really means. But as a whole individual, as a woman who is like whole and healed, not that that's ever really a like finalized process, but who has this connection to her instincts, she's not going to want to follow the leadership of a man who doesn't make her feel safe, who doesn't provide the energy that her instincts are looking for. And this is where I think about, if I could give young men and women or children like one gift that they could take through life to guide them, it would be a deep connection to their instincts. Because as human beings, we can be convinced of a lot of different philosophies about how to live life, about what is right and what is wrong, but your instincts do not lie. Your instincts are pure, and your instincts are deeply connected to your health and well-being, your mental health, your emotional health, your hormonal health, your ability to procreate. And this was the other thing that I noticed with my clients, my female clients, as they connected to that feminine energy, is like their intimate experiences were so different, where they were no longer in this like performative, porn star inspired perhaps, trying to please, trying to get an outcome, trying to lead in some way, even covertly, their intimate experiences. And instead they were like leaning back into this fully feminine experience and actually experiencing receiving a man fully, and obviously like in the context of receiving a man they respected fully. And yeah, this was, I think, another level for me where I was like, wow, there is so much um, truth, accuracy, I guess, in this process of helping people connect to their instincts. Because I know that when men and women are deeply connected to their instincts and they're working together in a way that honors their instincts, this is when you create the most incredible intimacy. This is when you create the most vibrant, vital families and communities, and also where you create the most vital, vibrant, healthy businesses, experiences, adventures, is when you're honoring these things. And it's been an incredibly beautiful thing to observe this happen for my clients. And also, I have this acute awareness of how the polarity teachings that are happening right now, some of them are being pretty misused. And I'm not sure exactly how it looks. I know that the answers will come to me, but I know that I personally have a lot of wisdom around this field. I also have a really good understanding of masculine instincts and how that works for them, and what are the common sort of things that we see in relationships that do not honor masculine instincts, and the common things in our culture that are essentially like an attack on masculine instincts or a depletion of. Not that masculine instincts really can be attacked. Like when they're intact, nothing can stop them. And also I have this awareness that it's like information that I want to deliver in a very conscious way, because like I said, I have seen teachings of polarity, masculine communication, feminine communication, used in a way that is not very sovereign, that is manipulative, and that is not really helping people to heal. But aside from that, what I would love to share with you guys today is just a little bit more about what I have seen with women as they have moved into, connecting more fully with their own feminine instincts. One thing I'd love to touch on is their experiences in motherhood. So often, and this is like very much like our culture, often we have in motherhood this concept that we have to like control our children. We have to be like constantly like leading them, telling them what to do, keeping them more in order, and so on. And we're like almost like we're imprinting them with something, who they should be. And this is where I see so many women burning out. I'm sure you've witnessed it, maybe you've experienced it yourself, but the woman who has a fake voice with her kids or other children, who has like a personality that she puts on and steps into when she's parenting. And I remember very early in parenthood hearing this expression, if you are exhausted, it's because you're playing a role. And I think that our culture has this very masculine way of women parenting their children, which is like like leading them, when in fact in an in an instinctually connected way. Of course, if everyone was connected to their instincts, we would probably live much more in a tribal setting where you wouldn't be alone with children all day as a mom, or like isolated in your little nuclear families. But what I see is that, you know, women experience postpartum depression, total burnout, like loss of identity, grief around identity, missing their career, missing that like fulfilled, accomplished, I got so much done today, I'm worthy of love and whatever things that I'm worthy of because I got so much done. And then you throw them into motherhood and you have these like beings who are their own people, who are not meant to be like led by their moms, but are meant to experience a wholesome environment in which they can grow and discover who they are and have access to their moms, which is very different. And this is again when I've seen women come back to their feminine instincts. For many women, what happens is they connect to this really playful, joyful part of themselves. And even women who I've worked with in their like 70s and 80s, this is like one of the most beautiful things I've ever experienced, is seeing how the feminine heart has all these different aspects to it, but the feminine heart has one aspect that is very much like the child of a heart, the heart of a child that's like innocent, playful, curious. And, you know, most women kind of like bury that somewhere along the way and become these very like, you know, rigid, controlling, serious beings when really like at our, again, in our instincts, women have this like playful, childlike innocence to their heart, as well as all the other wisdom. You know, we as women, we're not living a linear life. We're living much more of this like radial, radiant, circular existence of, you know, expanding in our girlhood, expanding in our womanhood, expanding in our wisdom, expanding as an oracle, expanding as a mother, expanding as a wife, as a lover. Like we continuously grow in all of these directions. It's not actually linear. It's very much like radiant. And when I see women come into feminine communication with their children, it's amazing because they stop arguing. There isn't this control seeking dynamic, and they become much more connected in how they're interacting. And it's super beautiful, especially like, and it's very different how they're interacting with their young children, how they're interacting with their teen boys and teen girls is very, very different, because as children leave childhood and become adults, that's when they enter into these more polarized masculine and feminine poles and connect to those instincts, right? And of course, at that point in a traditional culture, women, like children are with women mostly, and then at a certain point, as women begin to get older, they start to gravitate to doing certain work with women, and as boys turn into men, they are brought out to do things with men, which is very different. And that dynamic is those dynamics, even though we don't live in like a traditional sense, those dynamics, I have seen some really intense parenting relationships shift as women step into their feminine instincts. I've also seen parenting relationships totally heal as men step into their masculine instincts, because this is what their children need. Like, children are so hungry for that. Our whole society is hungry for both that deeply polarized instinctual man who is like strong and decisive and leading and penetrative with his energy, and stands in the role of protector and provider. Um, and then our society is also really hungry for that true instinctual feminine energy. How often have you met um, women who feel really regulated in their bodies, or who feel really relaxed, um, who feel at home in their nervous systems? This is something that I personally started to really desire to experience around me, and I noticed that I started to experience it with my clients, with my women clients. As we did this work, I would get to experience their raw desires expressed to me, as well as their heart totally unguarded, where they weren't. It actually became something I became very sensitive to, was when women were holding back and still guarding and protecting their heart, which I have a lot of compassion for. And when they would reach a place in our work together where that wasn't happening and they could be really honest. And so often I would hear, "This is the most honest I've ever been with anyone about this." And to me, that's one of the greatest honors. And always in that moment, I would have this awareness that this is what their husband or boyfriend, or men in their life, or other women in their life, need also to experience. Because in that moment, what happens is devotion happens. This is how devotion is ignited within us. This is why it's so easy for people to feel deep devotion, love, the desire to care for and protect, like puppies or babies or things that are cute and vulnerable, because that lives within each of us, masculine, feminine, men, women, whatever. That desire to protect lives within all of us. And what inspires that devotion, and that what actually amplifies the instinct in men to want to provide, lead, protect, make sure things are taken care of, to penetrate the world with their vision, their drive to, continuously strive to do their best, is actually that moment of experiencing her totally vulnerable, childlike heart. And this is like something that amplifies that. For men who are connected to their instincts, they're going to have that anyways. It's going to be like a burning fire that agitates, like they wake up every morning and they're like, "Oh my God, I gotta go." This is the other thing, totally a tangent, but very much related to this, is like when you really understand masculine instinctual energy at its core, it's the first time I really understood it in a cellular level in my body. I was like, I couldn't talk, because I was just like in awe of how much life force exists within men. Within that masculine energy is like insane raw power. It's like so much strength, so much power. And realizing in that moment also the suppression of that, and how that affects the health of men, their ability to think clearly, to make decisions, to lead themselves, all of that. And then also for men who are like connected to that raw, powerful energy, how much mastery is involved in being able to control that. I was like, I just, like I said, I couldn't talk. The first time it ever really hit me, I was like, this is phenomenal. And I was watching men spar. And that's when it really like hit me on such a full level. Was just this awareness that they're walking around all the time with that much energy. And then to see it have this, it wasn't like a fight, you know, that it's still controlled, and yet wearing protective gear, and you're like unleashing that life force. Um, you know, and then I started to realize how much the suppression of masculine energy, both in men and women in our culture, is contributing to depression, anxiety, um, all sorts of health disorders, weight gain, weight loss. Um, and, you know, this is where I realized, like, this is everything. If we're at a crossroads as human beings, and we have, you know, AI and all these other things, like, we live in this world that's rapidly changing, and we are at this crossroads where you can choose to become totally connected to your instincts. You can choose to train your body and your mind to be as strong as you possibly can. And you can train yourself to come back to those instincts. You're going to immediately be set apart from the collective society, because you are like a unicorn. And I often imagine, like, what would it be like to live in a society where that was normal? What would it be like to live in a society where, like, the warrior archetype was not this like heroic, unusual thing? Or, you know, we have these characters like Jocko Willink, like, who are dedicating whatever his like 4 hours every day to incredible fitness. What if that was actually just the norm? What do you think our society would look like? And what what really brings me another layer of passion in this work is seeing how it affects children. And, you know, we live in a time where children are exposed to a lot of very inverted philosophies. Children and young people growing up in this time, part of the world that I live in, if you believe in God, if you believe in family, if you want to be a mom, you are essentially counterculture at this point. And what this means is that we have all these people who are not actually focusing on, or even, I would say, fit to provide what children need. And on the flip side of that, when I see men and women connect to their instincts, and then I see children in those environments where that's present, those children are thriving. Those children are going to be fine. And I don't know about you, but I think that the value, quality of any species is greatly determined by the health of its offspring. And when I run anything through my own like feminine instincts, my own awareness of masculine instincts, and I connect to those principles, it's very easy for me to see what contributes to healthy offspring and what takes away from it, including fertility. So I also noticed that fertility increases, sex drive increases, overall ambition, drive, focus, all of this increases as both men and women connect to their instincts. And if we are indeed at a crossroads in humanity, I know that there are a group of you who are going to continue to move in the direction of deeply connecting to your instincts, finding the others who are doing the same, and working together to build a network of people, perhaps a society of people who are choosing that path and are choosing to raise their children in that path, and are choosing to surround themselves by men and women who are doing the same thing. I hope this was valuable for you guys today. Thank you for joining me, and I welcome anything that you would like to share, anything that came up for you through listening in today. Until next time.